alternatives. I think the way it works today, it doesn't work. So I think it is very important to have some alternative perspectives on what can we do in a different way. Thank you for coming all together.
It's just very nice to be here. I haven't given a presentation in Denmark in 2 years. 2 years ago I came for to a conference of this organization, ISPS. And it's an organization that promotes alternative or different psychosocial treatments for people labeled with schizophrenia. And there was a conference here in Copenhagen 2 years ago, and I came, and the only person that I knew in Denmark was Marion. And so I was very excited. Actually, I had not traveled in 15 years. It was the first time I'd left America in 15 years. Marion is a special person because she's extremely well connected. She knows half the people I know in America. In my network, she knows them also. So I came, and it started a new journey for me where I realized I made a first film showing that people can recover from this thing called schizophrenia without any medication. That was my point that I wanted to make in the movie. And I made the point quite loudly. But then what happened is I screened the movie a lot, many, many times, and I got lots of emails and people writing me letters, and I heard the criticisms they made. A lot of what people said is, oh, these 2 people you showed in this first movie, they can recover without medication, and they did it through intensive therapy for years and years. But this isn't realistic in the modern world. Who can pay for therapy for 8 years, 4 times a week, 5 times a week? This doesn't happen anymore, that this isn't possible, it's too expensive. And I knew that wasn't true. First, I'm a therapist in New York. I've done it for more than 10 years now. And I've seen people who got well without any medication, diagnosed with schizophrenia, that only came for 1 year, once a week, twice a week, sometimes longer, but sometimes much less than a year. And then what I started to hear is all these stories of people who had been labeled with schizophrenia, who got well, who never even were in therapy, who never were even part of any psychological program. And it made me curious. And so I've talked to many, many people now. And also I made a mission for the last 15 months. I've just been traveling around the world and visiting programs and seeing the work that they do, seeing if they can help people get well. See if they can help people step forward into recovery, help people who want to get well without medication or come down on medication. And I've been studying it. And one of the programs that I found that I love very much is in Gothenburg, and so I made a movie about them. The last thought I have is my movies are provocative. They make a very loud point, and I want them to do that. One thing I've been criticized for is you don't show the other side of the story. You don't show about people who do need medication, who want medication. You don't show about people who never get well. If there's 10,000 films and 10,000 books that show the other side, and there's very few that show the side about real alternatives that can help people get well without any pills, then I don't feel an obligation to show the other side. As a therapist, I worked with a lot of people who did want to take medication, who were not able to come off medication. So I know people have watched some of my films, and sometimes they get angry and upset, and for that reason it's like, I'm aware of that. I've had people cry when they watch them. Sometimes they get angry. Sometimes afterward they yell at me. And this is one side. The other side is people are often very happy. I wanted to show something that gave people a hope for a possibility.
As in the rest of the Western world right now, we are overwhelmed by manuals and to fill in questionnaires and so on. And since we don't do that, it's difficult. But what we try to do instead is to be as open as we can, which means that everyone who wants to take part in our work are welcome to take part in the work. And especially the people who refer to us, social service or psychiatry, or we have organizations in Sweden who also work with family homes, but they do it in a way as is, to explain it very, very simplified, that every morning the family home have to fill in a formula about the client, as they say, and in the evening you have to fill in another formula about the client, and you have to put 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 about the client, his or her behavior and so on. And these kind of organizations are nowadays very popular in Sweden. And since we are not at all an organization like that, it's a bit more difficult. It's a bit more tricky. So sometimes we have to cross our fingers.
Most people that come to you, they've been tried different things. They've been all through the manuals and it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
At that situation, the question is either to give up or in desperation try to let you have the chance.
Yeah, very many of the people who come to us, they have been in lots of different places. As for example, right now we are working with a young girl, she's 14 years old. She has been, I think, in 16 places before coming to us. And that is extreme.
As a therapist in New York, when people came to me with the serious problems, it was sort of the last chance. We have nothing to lose. Send him to this crazy therapist, and maybe he will help him, and maybe he will help this woman, maybe he will help this man, and I wasn't the first choice. It was the same philosophy in a bad way that was used 50, 60 years ago, when we've tried everything, we've tried every institution, we've tried every idea. Well, might as well try a lobotomy now. And I think that it's, at the end, it's like when nothing else works. Try something. Sometimes very good organizations can come then, and also very bad ideas happen then sometimes too, when everything else has failed.
What is very sad about this is that very, very often people do say, both those we call clients, but also their families, why were we not offered this before? Exactly. And this is still very touching for me to tell, because this happens too often, far too often.
The other film that I have here that I didn't show is Open Dialogue in Finland. And the main difference there is they work with everybody in the whole part of Western Lapland and Finland. And they meet people right away when they first have a problem, before they get on medication, before they've been in psychiatry, before they've gotten into a hospital. And then, I think you would agree, when you're meeting people immediately before they've been traumatized by the system for years or decades, then it's actually easy to work with people. It's after years and years and years of traumas and failures and tons of medications and off medication, on medication, 4 medications, 2 medications, then I think it's much harder. But early on, it's actually not as difficult at all.
Is it all out in the country, or do you also have in town? Is there what's kind of the sort of the philosophy? And then I was also thinking, can the people stay for as long as they want? I mean, what's the criteria for when it's over?
The usual time to stay is around 1 year, a year and a half. Most families live on the countryside. It's difficult to find people living in the city who have time enough.
Yeah, I was thinking.
But if people in the city have time, that would be excellent. But time is needed. And I also want to say, for those of you who don't know, all the people who come to our place do not have a psychosis diagnosis. We also work with kids having this kind of, ADHD, or families. Or when we started, it was just for grown-up people, adults having, as I would say, huge difficulties. But then we found out that the way we worked also seemed to be good for other kind of people. So nowadays it's both young people but also older people. But what is a rule is that when we work with young people, we always also invite the biological family. Always. That's a rule. And for me, it's very important to know that I am obliged to try also to invite the family.
I don't know how many here have read the books. I mean, read the books, not watched the movies, but read the books, The Lord of the Rings. Because in these books, there is a passage where they enter the mines of Moria. They sit outside the gates, and they are trying to find the password. And sometime one of them comes up with the idea that the right name is friend. So to enter that isolated place where people are, where the dwarves were keeping themselves cut off from the outside world. And you have to be a friend. You have to be some caring person that can actually be a friend and be a partner in life to these people who have these very, very troubled minds. In psychiatry and in medicine in general, by making rules about things, by manualizing, putting things into manuals and education and teaching on how to deal with these problems, we tend to overlook what's obvious. And what's obvious is exactly that we provide these people with 200% more of what they lack, because they are isolated, and we need to bring them into or back to life. What is wonderful about your organization is that you can't standardize this. As you said also, it's very difficult to prove this to any authority, what you do, because it's very different what you do with each person.
I know that all the family homes I work with would say to me, Carina, for God's sake, don't talk about us as if we are gods or some kind of perfect people, because they are not and we are not. It's more to try to everyday work to create a context where it is okay not to be perfect. And when someone, if it is the client or the family home or me as a therapist, become crazy or behave in a stupid way or whatever you call it, there is always someone who, as I said before, can see that and do something, say something, because we do stupid things all the time. Not all the time, but I mean we do stupid things, we say stupid things. I think the organization is built upon an idea that that is a good base, to have an idea that we are not perfect, but we need to deal with that. And that is, I think that is what it is about. As for example, I can tell, when we had been working for about 2 months or something like that, I can call her Maria, this woman, and I really felt I can't do this. It was too difficult, but I was afraid because I was constantly confused as it felt. And I remember I went to Barbro and I just laid down in her couch, I think, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. My heart is beating too fast all the time. I can't do it. And she sat there, and at that time she still smoked a lot. She doesn't anymore. But she said, but you can't stop, she said. How would that look like if you now come to Maria and say, I'm sorry, I can't go on with this? That's a part of our organization, I think. How would it be if we get rid of the most important principles of life? So our work is to find a way to keep on working. You mean how many people who feel or experience their life get better after being in our organization? Yeah, around 70–80%, I would say.
Like these WHO studies that Robert Whitaker made famous with schizophrenia, these studies are with very specific diagnostic criteria, and so they only want to look at people that could qualify for one type of DSM-3 or DSM-4 diagnosis. And Carina's organization is working with everybody and all sorts of different types of people. They're seeing people who've been in psychiatry for 20 years, people who are having their first problems, people who are having drug addiction and schizophrenia, this, that, all these different things. So it doesn't lend itself very well to defining what percentage of people meet these criteria. The best that I could do is when I was there, just ask people, how do you feel the program is? And what I consistently heard, and it was a heck of a lot more than 70%, is, I really like this place, they're helping me. Everywhere else I've been sucked, it was horrible, this place is good.
For instance, yesterday, when I was about to go home, I was sitting in my room. There came a young man, he's 19 I think, and he's not my client. And this man, he came to us for 1 year and 2 months ago, something like that. He had 5 different psychiatric diagnoses. He had such heavy medication that it should be, as I think, criminalized to give that much medication to such a young man since he was at the age of 11. He has no medication anymore.
Do you wonder which family will suit this client's needs best, or is it just whatever does it?
You know, during the first visit, after 5 minutes, you know. And it happens that people come and for example, say that the only thing I know is that I can't go to a family home who have children. And it ends up with her going to a family home with 5 children. Because I just kind of know this is going to work. And I can't explain it.
What do they do? Do they get a job, or what happens with them?
Most of the people, they keep in touch with the family home where they have stayed. In our organization, as I suppose and hope in all organizations, it's very important to try to find a good enough way to carry on when leaving our organization, which means that before someone leaves, there shall be a good enough base to carry on. It's not always like that, but I would say most of the time it is like that. Sometimes people keep in touch with a therapist, maybe come twice a month or something like that. And sometimes it happens that after 3 years, someone phones and say, it's hard right now, can we meet? And then we can meet because we have that freedom. I mean, we don't have to ask for permission to see people.
How do they find you?
How they find us?
Is it from the official psychiatric?
The psychiatry are not the one who makes the official referral to us.
No.
It's more usual that the social service does that. When we started to work, it was more common.
Yeah.
In the beginning of 1990, it was more easy to have referrals from psychiatry.
Oh, yeah.
It has also to do with the laws, hasn't it? The social services in one, they divide people into different parts. This part is psychiatry and this part is social service and so on. I also think that psychiatry in Gothenburg they don't like us always. No, because I think they find us too provocative. We have a very good collaboration with some people at the psychiatry, absolutely. But I think Gothenburg is special. They are very biological. I mean, in general, it's very biological.
We're really trying to make everything specialized and saying that to send people who need specialized psychiatric treatment into a home with dogs at home that can help. I mean, it's an absurd idea from the point of view of this being a biological disease that has to have special treatment.
It's the same like old people in Denmark. They found out that maybe they should start to let old people get up in the morning when they want and eat when they want and go to bed when they want. So it is people, human people, and not patients, not just before death.
There's a lot of programs that are historical programs, especially in the United States, that I've studied, that we're getting fantastic results with people, let's say, labeled with schizophrenia or some kind of psychosis, and places that kept very good data, got some of the best results in the world. The evolution of these places is they do well, they get very good results, they get noticed, and then they get shut down, or they die from the inside, and they start there's a lot of pressure from the outside to become more conventional and to become more traditional. And then they start doing things like prescribing much more medication, or it can be as simple as they get a new director, or the director has a different philosophy. If you get a high level of success, you get less money, because then you become a challenge to the system. Like one of the best examples, you probably know this, is Soteria. Marion also. Soteria got some of the best results in America with people first experiencing psychosis. They were getting fantastic results without medication, and as soon as their results became well known, the National Institute of Mental Health cut off all their funding. And it was just basically very simple why they did it. It was just a total challenge to everything else that the National Institute of Mental Health was funding. So there's a lot of programs that do good, it's called good psychosocial work in America, but they prescribe a lot of medications. But if you look at these programs 30 or 40 years ago, their recovery rates were much better. The stories, tons of people coming through with all sorts of problems, getting well, and when they weren't using medication. Now it's like you go to the places and they're beautiful, beautiful farms and beautiful residences, but everybody's on drugs. They're all, and it's like this is the same place that 40 years before was much better, and they're just much worse now. So I wondered that about your organization. It's like, what happens if you become too public?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so much about that.
That's probably why you do well.
But it seems as if you have to be a messiah to do this, and you have to be this, la 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 la. And of course, it's not like that at all. And then the same person said, well, I must say it seems fantastic people, these family homes, and you, how can you do this, and da da da. And I said, well, most of our family homes, they would say, how can you do the job you do? How do you manage to do a job you don't even believe in anymore?
You being conventional,
yes,
traditional
yeah.
psychiatry?
How do you manage to do things you don't believe in? How do you motivate yourself to fill in things you do? I mean, so you can turn it that way instead. And I think that is the turning we need to do. And once we have started to see that, it will not be difficult at all anymore. I think so. I hope so. Because it is much more easy, as all of us know, to do things we believe in.
But traditional psychiatry, they can put 1,000 people on medication, and in 40 years, 750 of them are going to have all sorts of side effects, but it's no problem at all, because that's just the standards of care. That's what we're supposed to do.
People are dying, so people actually die. We've started a society.
And commit suicide.
Yeah.
Once they start taking medication.
Yeah, we started a network for the people, for the families who are left behind because their family members have died of the drugs.
And right now, I'm working with a boy. He's just 14 years, and he has disappeared from the family home. So right now, I don't know where he is, and this is awful. Really, I don't know. But what does help me at the moment now is that I share this with the family home and with my colleague who works very close to the family home, and also with his biological parents. So I just mean, if I had not had them, I would absolutely not have done the things I do in my work. And I think we shall pay much more attention to that. Our own need also for other people. And that is the challenge, as I think. And we need to talk more about that, and not just talk, but organize our work so that we are not that alone as we are. I think that is what has helped me a lot in my profession, in the environment with these so-called ordinary people, is that they don't pretend as if they know, as we have to do as professionals. I think much more. That's the kind of being a professional, is to act as if we do know, even if we don't. And that has influenced me, as I think, very much, that it has been okay, together with all these people, not to know. And this is difficult to describe, but I hope you understand what I mean. Because, I mean, for instance, yesterday, I met one a woman who sees me every week. She's not staying in a family home, but she comes to see me. And we had a kind of conversation, as all of you also has, as I suppose. And we were sitting there for 50 minutes. And after that, I thought to myself, how would this be possible to describe? It is not possible to describe. I mean, she said maybe 25 words, and I said maybe 40 words, I don't know. And there were some kind of warm feelings in the stomach, and there was something, you know, in my arm, and da-da-da. And then she left, and I was extremely happy when she had left. And I just, ooh, wow! This is a privilege, a privilege. How to describe that? In a scientific, professional, therapeutic.
I think that 99% of people working in mental health services are under influence of the biomedical paradigm. How would you go about on a systemic way to make it possible for people to take these risks that it is to reach in and take that journey with them?
I had an idea that it seemed to be good to make room for both the family homes and the professionals at the same time. So that was a part of the structure. We should meet every second, twice a year. We should do that. And in the beginning, I can assure you, it was awful. I mean, people were sitting there in the big hall, or I can talk about myself. When I started to work, I went to the family homes and I told these experienced, much older people than myself, how they should do. And the family homes, they told the client who stayed in their home what he should do and she should do. But the first thing to do was to make space for all these things and to collect people in the same room and to face, this is how it is. And that's where everything starts, as I suppose. And there were family home members who, they didn't say a thing for 3 years. Yeah. These people are now the ones who talk more than anyone else. I mean, you know this is common knowledge, everybody knows this, but to make it happen, you have to create a place where these things might happen. If you separate people, these clients there, professionals there, doctors there, it's impossible.
This whole biomedical thing about we have to reduce risk. I think that I'm not someone who loves all the studies. I don't remember them after I read them. There's probably here people that know that better. But I think if they want to talk about risk, look at the risk of the results of what happens with the traditional biomedical system. That's where the real risks are. And I think there's tons and tons and tons of data about the horrors of the risk. In my experience, it's far less risky to be gentle, respectful, non-medical, work with people who are having serious emotional problems.
You can say that psychiatry is the only medical speciality who makes patients worse. In fact, they shorten people's lifespans about, here in Denmark, by about 20 years if you're on the strong antipsychotic drugs.
And the doctors go on strike, then there's less people that die.
Yeah, that's
So I think it's 4 o'clock, so out of respect for the time, we'll wrap it up. And thank you all for coming.
One. For me, yes. Wow.
No, but the serious answer is to be very open, because there is nothing to hide. I do think that there will be lots of organizations like this in the future. I do think so.